Hello, Professor Isaacs. Today I'm going to do the three muscle stretches with your gastrocnemius muscle, your hamstrings, and your adductor pollicis. To start with, I'll go ahead and do. I'll go ahead and do hamstrings while I'm up here. Just move this over here. For a static hamstring stretch, you would probably just bend over, touch your toes, or just bend over by keeping your chest out. So that way you can keep this up front. You're going to hold this for about 15 seconds to a couple of minutes. This is usually good just for general stretching, although it exerts a lot of energy, so you really wouldn't want to do this before you were to, say, exercise or do any sort of physical activity. But it is good to do for your overall health, just to stretch at random points in the day. Next up, you would have your, what can I use in here for a PNF stretch? Well, I guess technically for a PNF stretch, let's see where I can set this, probably right here. I don't have anybody with me to try to do this, but for technicality, you could use the table for a PNF stretch on your hamstring by putting your leg up on the table and then just pushing your weight into it, pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and then releasing that and going further down with your leg, and just continuing to kind of squat down more and more on your backside. So, I guess that's probably easier. Put closer here, kind of like this, and just like that. Typically, you're going to do that. From my experience, stretching in that way is usually good whenever you're about to play a sports match, or you're in the middle of a sports match. For me, I've always played soccer. We usually do that whenever we get cramps in our hamstrings, or just during halftime, so that way we don't let our muscles go back to the way they were before we were playing. Which, it'd be pretty bad if you started cramping in the middle of the game because you sat down during halftime. Next for hamstrings, I guess I'll leave it here. But for a dynamic stretch, you could just do like kicks like that. You'd just be stretching that. Now that's something you would want to do before a sports game, though it is it's something to get your muscles moving and working before you actually go completely all out during the game, which is it's ideal before you play a sports game, but it's I would say the PNF is still better, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. Though I have pretty regularly done dynamic stretching before any sort of soccer match, so I guess it is effective in that, right? Next, while I have it down here, I suppose I'll go ahead and do the gastrocnemius muscle. Could use that. Let's do this. Ooh, set that on the floor. Let's do this. For a calf stretch, for a static calf stretch, you're probably going to want to kind of incline yourself like this and go as far back as you realistically can on that calf, just to stretch it out. Typically, I've done this before soccer matches, although again, it is pretty taxing energy-wise, so it's not very efficient to do before you play any real sports, but it is something that you could do for your overall health if you've been sitting around for a long period of time throughout the day. Typically, you want to hold this stretch for about 15 seconds to a few minutes. While I'm down here, I'll go ahead and do a dynamic stretch like this, I suppose, where you can kind of rock back and forth on your calf, kind of giving it some movement for a dynamic stretch, which could be useful before you do play a sports match, regardless of the sport. I don't exactly know how long you would want to do this, but it is useful in that regard. Then for your PNF stretch, or your assisted stretch for your calf, you could just use like this table here, just kind of push down, well, bend your knee a bit and then just push down with your calf muscle. Get a good stretch in there. My leg doesn't slide off the table. Then you can kind of push it down a bit more, kind of close that gap between, close the gap between the top of your foot and your shin. And then release pressure, pushing against it, and let your heel go down towards the floor a bit more. Finally, well, I guess I should say when you would do that. You're probably going to want to do that, again, at halftime for sports is a good place to do it, or before you were to do some sort of exercise, you could do that PNF stretch just to loosen your muscles a bit before you tried to work on it. Now for your adductor pollicis, which if you don't know is actually your thumb web right here. It's the muscle here. Technically you can stretch it, so I figured why not go for it. For a static stretch, you're probably just going to stretch it out to the side, just like this. You're probably going to want to hold this stretch for about 15 seconds to a few minutes. It's something to do, nice to do, especially as you age, to keep your hands more flexible, because as you do age, you do have a chance of your hands just, I forget what it's called, but there is a condition where your hands will just they'll just become permanently stuck in a certain way if you're not using them or stretching them enough. So it is important as you get older in life. You hold that for about 15 seconds to 30 seconds, and then you kind of let it go. For your PNF, all you would need to do is you could do this with your own hand, push back on it, and then push back against your hand with that thumb. This would be something good to do, say before you were about to write down a lot of things for a lengthy period of time, where your hands could get sore, and then release and push back some more, push against it again with your thumb. That would be a good way to, a good reason to stretch out your thumb like that. I'm not saying you have to, but it is something that you could theoretically do. I would recommend it, but that is also my opinion. As for your dynamic stretch with your adductor pollicis, you could just go back and forth, kind of rocking it like so, just making it a bit more active, almost like you're doing a thumb war, but you're not really. A good reason to do this would be just so you don't pull it, say if you were to be trying to do a thumb war with somebody, or just for generally being more flexible whenever you do attempt to do a thumb war against somebody. Sometimes it's useful if you get your thumb all the way back here, away from somebody. And that is everything I've got for 3 groups of muscles with the 3 different methods of stretching.